Jacob Hornberger, president of the Future of Freedom Foundation, and welcome to this week's Trump Watch. As y'all can see, I have a different background than the one I usually use, and that's because I'm here in my hotel room in Dallas, Texas, where I'm still spending Thanksgiving holidays with family members. So, let's begin with Venezuela. Lots going on with Venezuela. As everyone knows, the Trump administration has been massing a military armada, a massive military armada there in the Caribbean off Venezuelan shores, and for the last several weeks has been killing people in boats that they suspect are transporting drugs. They say that this violates U.S. drug laws and that they have the authority to just kill these people. Well, as I have long maintained and other people have maintained, including people in the mainstream press, these are illegal killings, and they clearly are illegal killings. I mean, they're trying to couch them in different theories. Oh, well, it's the drug war. If it's a war, it's a war. A drug war is a drug war. And so we have the right to kill people in war. Well, that's ridiculous. I mean, the drug war is just a metaphor. These are criminal offenses. When people violate U.S. drug laws, they're committing a crime. That's why they're prosecuted in court, in state court or federal court. And you can't just kill people who are suspected of killing a crime. For one thing, everybody is presumed innocent under our criminal justice system until they're proven guilty in a court of law. None of these people have been proven guilty. Therefore, they are presumed to be innocent, but they're not being treated as innocent. Here, they're being killed as if they're already guilty and that as if they have been proven guilty. And so the correct legal scholars, including military lawyers, are saying, no, this can't be, because what you essentially have is the military involved in the enforcement of U.S. drug laws. Now, here in the United States, the military is prohibited from doing that. That's the Posse Comitatus Act. The American people have said, we don't want the military involved in law enforcement. Okay, now, the military in Latin American countries and in other countries, especially in totalitarian regimes, no problem. They use the military all the time in terms of enforcing criminal laws. But here, we've said we don't want the military involved in law enforcement and criminal offenses. And yet that's exactly what the military is doing in the Caribbean with the drug war. And now, it may be legal, maybe Posse Comitatus doesn't extend over there to the high seas, but they're violating the spirit of what Americans don't want here in the United States. They don't want the military involved in enforcing criminal statutes like drug laws. And so what they're doing is just saying, well, that's only on the domestic side, but they're ignoring the spirit behind the laws, the intent behind the laws, by embroiling the military in enforcing the drug war on the high seas. Or they're saying, well, they're terrorists. They're terrorists. Well, the principle is no different. Just because somebody is an accused terrorist, terrorism is a criminal offense. That's why there's criminal prosecutions, again, in federal court, with respect to terrorism violations. That's why there's prosecutions there. And so the same principles apply on violations of that criminal statute as they do on the drug war criminal statute. You can't just go and kill people. You have to accuse them formally of having committed an act of terrorism, prosecute them, convict them using relevant, competent evidence, and then you punish them after that. But even then, there is no case that, as far as I know, that a drug case involves a death penalty unless there's a killing involved. But just, possessing or distributing tons of cocaine or methamphetamines or fentanyl or whatever does not merit a death penalty. And the same thing with terrorism. I think if they commit an act of terrorism, then you've got a death penalty offense. But if they're just an attempted act of terrorism, I don't think that's a death penalty offense. But in any event, it requires due process of law. And so this ruse of simply labeling people, that's the attitude that U.S. officials seem to be taking, that, if we just label them a terrorist, that means the military can now enforce drug laws. No, it doesn't work that way. That the law continues to be established that you have to use due process of law under our system of government. Now and then they say, well, this is a war. This is a war. Well, it's ridiculous. It's not a war. A war is between nation states, not between groups that are involved in criminal violations like drug laws. And there certainly is no shooting taking place. The people in these boats that they've been killing are not attacking the United States. They're not invading the United States. In fact, the one excuse that they haven't used to justify these killings, which kind of surprises me, is that, for a long time we've heard that the Venezuelan people were invading us, and the immigrants are invaders, Jacob. The immigrants are invaders, which was always pure nonsense, because an invasion is like what the U.S. government did to Iraq. Bombs, missiles, bullets, death, destruction. The entire country of Iraq was destroyed. That's war. These Venezuelan immigrants come here with their babies in their arms, and they're trying to sustain their lives. They're trying to save their lives as a result of the sanctions that the U.S. government has put on Venezuela, squeezing them to death, as well as the socialist system that is the other part of the vice, squeezing them. So, all in all, these drug war killings are illegal. There's no question about that. But they all feel like they're immune, that they can't get prosecuted. They've got this Office of Legal Counsel that says, well, once we issue an order here that absolves anybody of war crimes or criminal offenses, that's the end of the matter. And so it's like a get out of jail free card. Go ahead and kill to your heart's content because you've got your Office of Legal Counsel here opinion. That was, when I see that, I think that was those guys at Nuremberg, the Germans that were prosecuted at Nuremberg. That was their big mistake, was not having Hitler have an Office of Legal Counsel that drew up this document that said, hey, whatever you guys do, you're absolved. And then they wouldn't have been prosecuted at Nuremberg because they would have had that Office of Legal Counsel get out of jail free document. But now something new has come up. Now, it was always suspected, or it was reported, that I think it was the first boat they attacked. They've killed about 80 people here, illegally. But it was that first boat, it was reported, or maybe it was a second or third boat, irrelevant, that was turning around and headed back to Venezuela when they attacked it. I mean, that's the equivalent of shooting people in the back. I mean, that's just horrific to kill people militarily that are in a civilian little boat that pose no threat to the military whatsoever. They're heading back to Venezuela. It's the equivalent of shooting somebody in the back. But now it turns out that in that first boat attack, they had kept this secret. I don't know how it came out, but somebody leaked it, that there were 2 survivors of the attack on that little boat. And they were bobbing in the water there or holding on to the boat. And guess what the U.S. military did? Yep. They went in for a second strike to kill those survivors. Now, if there's anything that's clear, that is totally 100% illegal. Okay? There's no way they can defend that. And you can see the what appears to me to be panic on the part of Secretary of War Hegseth. I mean, he is, I think, freaking out here. And he was saying, no, he's now saying, oh, no, I didn't issue that order. He's like acknowledging that this is an illegal order, and it is. I mean, every military official, everybody agrees it's an illegal order. You don't kill survivors. If it's a war, you take them into custody as prisoners of war. But if they're defenseless, they're disarmed, they're just survived this boat attack, you don't kill them. And yet that's precisely what they did. And what they are apparently trying to do, Hegseth seems to be doing, at least that's the appearance, is putting the blame on the admiral that issued the order. If somebody had to issue the order to fire that second time, and it appears to be the admiral, a guy named Frank Bradley, who graduated from the Naval Academy. And This is one of my big beefs with the professional academies is that they inculcate this mindset of blind obedience to orders. You get that order, you carry it out. That's what patriotism is really all about. And this is what Trump has been doing in consolidating power within the military. He wants people that are going to follow his orders. Now, if we digress a moment, we go over to this group of people in Congress who issued a document that said, or a declaration that said to the troops, you don't have to obey illegal orders. In fact, you shouldn't obey illegal orders. I mean, every soldier understands that. You don't obey an illegal order. You disobey it. Now, are there risks involved? Absolutely there's risks. But there's risks both ways. But that's your duty, never to obey an illegal order. Well, Trump has come out with this big denunciation of this group of members of Congress, calling it sedition, saying that there may be a death penalty involved here. Well, sedition is when you're trying to, overthrow the government. All these people are saying is, don't obey an illegal order. And what Trump and many in the military establishment have been trying to do is to translate that into saying, don't obey orders, disobey orders. And you see, they don't want that. They don't want troops to disobey orders. This is why I've always said that the troops they ostensibly take an oath to support and defend the Constitution, but really, that's not the case. Their loyalty is to the president. Whatever the president says, they're going to carry out his orders. They're not going to sit there and say, well, is this constitutional or not? Their mindset is, the president's been democratically elected. We're going to follow his orders. We're supporting and defending the Constitution on that basis. And that's what Trump wants. He wants people in the military to just obey whatever he says. And so these 6 members of Congress, they pose a grave threat to that mindset on the part of Trump. They don't want them questioning orders. As long as they got this Office of Legal Counsel document, you don't need to worry about whether this thing's illegal or not. And so somebody had to fire the missiles or drop the bombs on those 2 people. And that team or that soldier, that bomber, undoubtedly received orders from above because he knows he's not supposed to do that. And so he's under an awkward position. He knows he's not supposed to be killing those people in the water, but presumably he's being ordered on top, which would make Bradley the culprit here. But so it appears that they're going to make Bradley the scapegoat. Now, he's not totally a scapegoat because he knows he should not have issued that order if, in fact, he did issue that order. But will Bradley fall on the sword? If Hegseth told him, go ahead and take out those other 2, will Bradley fall on the sword and commit perjury if he's summoned to testify and say, yeah, no, I made it on my own. I misinterpreted the orders that Hegseth gave me? Or will he say, no, I told Hegseth that they were their 2 survivors and he told me kill them all? So we don't know how that's going to turn out, but there is no question that this was an illegal killing. But of course, the overall context is they're all illegal killings. And so they all should be condemned. But now let me bring up another aspect of this, and that is the C word. Nobody's bringing up the C word in this, and it really needs to be brought up, and especially in the context of these military attacks on these little boats. And that's the C word is cowardice. I mean, these attacks are just cowardice. Not just the attacks on these 2 survivors, but just the attacks on these boats. These boats pose no threat to the ships out there. We're talking about a massive aircraft carrier. We're talking about B-52 bombers. We're talking about a massive armada. This is the most powerful military in history. And massacring these people is just pure cowardice. Now, I was in the infantry, and they had something called the Combat Infantry Badge. I presume they still have it. And that is that any soldier that is in the infantry that's in combat gets the Combat Infantry Badge that he puts on his uniform. And my hunch is that there's the same thing over there in the Caribbean, that there's something, a combat badge, the Caribbean Combat Medal or something, which really should be a message, a medal for cowardice. Because all they have to do, and all they've had to do, is just approach these boats. They're not going to resist. Not a giant warship and a massive armada surrounding them. They're not going to resist. All they had to do is take them into custody, arrest them, bring them back to the United States, prosecute them, and that would be it. They didn't do that. Instead, they've just attacked them and killed them. For me, it's just pure cowardice. And the whole sham of it all. The two were taken prisoner. I think they got a little sheepish after the killing of those first two. And so two more were found alive from these attacks. Guess what they did with those? You think they took them out of action? They said, oh, well, these are narco-terrorists. They're flooding America with drugs. They're attacking us with drugs. They're coming into the United States and injecting people with fentanyl and all this nonsense. They released them. Yeah, they released them back to their countries. I think one was from Colombia and one was from Ecuador, and they just released them back to join the narco gangs. What's that all about? I mean, you're over there killing them or trying to kill them because they're supposedly bringing drugs in the United States, and so instead of taking them into custody, which they already had them into custody, and bringing them back, taking them out of action in this war, they release them back to the enemy. So they continue doing the same thing. I mean, it goes to show you what a sham this whole drug war thing is down there. And then now it turns out that President Trump has just pardoned a guy who's the former president of Honduras who got convicted. Now here we have due process of law. This guy got prosecuted, he got indicted, he got convicted, he got sentenced. I don't know what his sentence is, 40 years or something like that. I mean, which really is part of the whole sham of the drug war. I mean, he just pardons this guy who I think had been convicted of bringing like 400 tons of cocaine into the country, something like that. Some humongous amount of cocaine. He pardons him. The guy walked out of jail free today or yesterday or whatever. It's amazing. Well, wait a minute. What about the big drug war? What about killing all these little boat people? You know, isn't that supposed to stop the flow of drugs? And now they're really releasing a kingpin. They're killing the little people in the boats. And he's releasing this huge kingpin. What is that all about? I mean, it really goes to show you the whole sham, the whole racket of this drug war. It's just a racket. It's been going on for decades. It's been going on since I was a kid. I saw it there on the border. I grew up on the Texas-Mexico border. I've seen this drug war. I've seen the record drug busts. I've seen the DEA with their big drug busts and their criminal prosecutions, and I've seen the U.S. attorneys, crowing about their conviction rate, and I've seen federal judges meting out big sentences, which they're all doing the same as their predecessors were doing in the 70s. For what? They've been putting people in jail for 40 years, for 50 years now. For what? It doesn't accomplish anything. It's just a big racket. It's a racket that keeps them going. The drug war bureaucracy, the federal judges, the federal prosecutors, and it's a way to control the American people. If you have a racket where you can punish any American for ingesting a substance, you're in control. That is not a free society. Free society is where the citizen is sovereign. He can ingest whatever he wants to ingest. I don't care how dangerous it is or how destructive it is. It's his business. If he wants to smoke cigarettes, if he wants to drink alcohol, if he wants to become an alcoholic, if he wants to be a drug addict, that's part of what being in a free society is all about. So the drug war is just a racket to control, to bring money into the bureaucracy, and to keep these cartels going. I mean, you see, that's the way they keep these cartels going, because they're black market. I mean, that's how the black market works. So you've got a racket that brings into existence the cartels, and then you use the cartels as the excuse to crack down even more and go off on these larks of like drug war killings in the Caribbean. Great big racket. But as it appears, it seems that what Trump is really doing is using the drug war racket as a ruse for regime change, which should not be surprising. Now, it's difficult to really know who's behind this regime change push there in the Caribbean, whether it's Trump himself or whether it's the national security establishment that is pressuring Trump to go off in this direction. I mean, remember, Trump campaigned for president again on the same basis that he had in the 2020 election, that he was against foreign wars, against the deep state. He was going to drain the swamp. Notice you don't ever hear that anymore, any more than you heard it during his first term. It's just during the campaign that you hear it. And there were even libertarians who fell for this the second time around. It, Jacob, Trump's a libertarian. He's a libertarian, Jacob. He's going to stop the deep state. He's going to dismantle the deep state. He's going to stop the foreign wars. And, well, maybe so, but he's been absorbed by the deep state. I mean, I don't think there's any question of that. He and the deep state are now one and the same. And you can see this in the Caribbean there. They're both on the same page. They're looking at regime change to get rid of Nicolas Maduro and put in a U.S. puppet. And so, as I've indicated before in previous Trump watches, I think the idea was to intimidate Maduro. I think it still is, to scare him and say, you're going to be killed. If we're willing to kill these boat people, we will not hesitate to kill you, because they're saying that he's a big narco-terrorist. They've got a $50 million reward out, hoping that somebody within the regime there, some military guy, takes him out or kidnaps him and brings him to justice in Washington, where he can be paraded down the street in chains and so forth, like the old Roman emperors used to do. But it's clear that this is what this ruse is all about, regime change, that Trump is over there hoping that he can be the big hero, that he brought freedom and democracy to Venezuela by intimidating Maduro into leaving office and heading off into Spain or wherever with hundreds of millions of dollars of ill-gotten taxpayer money. But so far it's not working. It's very interesting. Maduro's not going. And, there's no question what the military outcome will be if an attack is taking place. But Trump is moving slowly in that direction. And like I've said from the beginning, Trump has put himself in an untenable position, whether wittingly or unwittingly, because once Maduro didn't capitulate, Trump almost has to attack at this point. I don't see, he's just declared, he just declared Venezuelan skies closed. He's told airliners, you're not to go in there. I mean, under what authority does he do such a thing? Now, what I find really kind of amusing on this is that the mainstream press is, for 3 or 4 years now, Russia aggressor, Russia aggressor, Russia aggressor. Even though NATO played a critically important role in motivating and provoking Russia into attacking Ukraine, over here there's no provocation at all. I mean, Maduro has not been provoking or causing Trump to attack Venezuela. But that's essentially what he's going to do if he does it, Trump. But notice the U.S. mainstream press, there's no talk about aggression, which will be just as bad, if not worse, than Russia's aggression of Ukraine. So you can have these two surreal universes, simultaneous universes. Aggressor over here. Oh, no, we're just enforcing the drug war over here. I mean, it's ludicrous. And then here's the other big thing about this thing. What they're not mentioning in all this is what's going on with Duterte, the ex-president of Philippines. The International Criminal Court is prosecuting him for essentially doing what Trump has been doing there and killing these drug war suspects. That's why they're going after Duterte. They're accusing him of ordering his forces, his military and police forces, paramilitary forces in the Philippines, to kill drug war suspects on sight. No trial, no due process, just killing them. The International Criminal Court, that's what they're prosecuting him for. But over here, nobody's bringing that up. It's, oh, no, Jacob, he's just enforcing the drug war. What? It's the same principle here. But over here, oh, yeah, it's good that the International Criminal Court is doing this. But over here, oh, no, this is not criminal conduct, Jacob. This is just enforcing the drug war. This is really bizarre stuff. And another interesting thing aspect of this is Senator Kelly. You know, Kelly's one of these 6 congressmen that have said that soldiers don't have to obey unlawful orders, and you know, Trump has said, "Oh no, this is sedition. This is sedition." Well, no, all they're saying is no, don't obey illegal orders. So, but what they're doing with Kelly, he's a retired Navy. He's in the U.S. Senate, but he retired from the Navy. He left the Navy. they're looking at ways. They're looking for ways to recall him to active duty. How do they do that? I mean, the guy's retired. He left the Navy, but they're looking for ways to recall him to active duty so they can court-martial him for sedition, which is a death penalty offense, because he's over there saying, "Don't obey illegal orders," which no soldier's supposed to do is obey an illegal order. But you know, I sit there and you know, I was in the military in the reserves, and I remember that after 8 years in the reserves, I got a document from the Pentagon saying that, you know, you fulfilled your 8 years, you're now released. And I read this thing real carefully, and I said, no, this is not what I want. So I wrote the Pentagon, and I said, thank you for your nice document here. I don't want this. I want a discharge. They were trying to pull a fast one on me. I'm convinced of it. And I kept pressing, and finally I got my honorable discharge. But I think that if I hadn't gotten the discharge, they'd have this power over me, that they could recall me because I'd never been discharged anytime they wanted. But I got the discharge. I mean, I know how these people operate. So that's what's been going on in Venezuela. There's also this ambush of these 2 troops, tragic, there in Washington, D.C., by this Afghan guy. And they're all blaming refugees. Trump is saying we're going to ban refugees from Afghanistan, I think any third world country, and they're using it as a way to blame immigrants. But notice what they're not doing. This guy worked for the CIA in Afghanistan. Okay, he got trained in CIA tactics. He was working for the CIA. Now, what was the CIA doing in Afghanistan? What was the Pentagon doing? They didn't have authority there. There was no declaration of war from Congress. That's what the Constitution requires. And it was all because, they say, Osama bin Laden was hiding there. Well, that's, again, a police action. And you need the consent of the host government there in order to go after a suspected criminal. But when the Bush administration demanded the extradition of Osama bin Laden, the Afghan government didn't have to comply with that because there's no extradition agreement. And they said, tough luck, then we're going to invade. So it was an illegitimate invasion. They destroyed the whole country. At the Future of Freedom Foundation, we were opposing this from the very beginning. We point out, as well as the Iraq invasion, you're going to end up killing multitudes of innocent people that had nothing to do with the 9/11 attacks. You know, just sit back and wait till there's the opportunity to capture this guy and then bring him back to justice. But no, they have this full-scale invasion that destroyed the country. I don't know whether that has motivated this guy, but one thing's for sure. I think he got motivated by the fact that U.S. troops are there occupying Washington. Here in the United States, you've got troops occupying American cities. That's not a free society. When you see troops occupying cities, that is the opposite of a free society. And it's what I've been saying for many years now, is this tightening of the screw of the government on the freedom and the privacy of the American people causes off-kilter people to go off and do bizarre things. And my hunch is that this guy's off-kilter. And that with the CIA training and destroying his entire country and maybe killing a lot of his friends, and he ends up over here, he sees these troops occupying American cities, and he goes off and does this off-kilter thing and tragically kills 2 members of the National Guard who are really civilians that are in the Guard. Horrific. But this is why I keep saying that we've got to do some real soul searching in this country. Is that, you know, what is this? What is America all about? Why do we have troops in American cities? How does this turn America into a great nation? And these drug war killings and and this tightening of the screw, the ever tightening of the screw that is setting off these off-kilter people with these irrational mass killings. It just it's horrific. But what it requires is not just, oh, well, this is Donald Trump's fault, or this is this person's fault, or we need to get better people in public office, or bring back the Democrats and all that nonsense. What we've got to do some soul searching on is, what are the systems that are producing all this dysfunctionality? And one of the premier systems that we're dealing with is this national security state system, the system that's involved in these drug war killings over there. And then this drug war system over here that's just horrific, has been for decades. And then this military control system that's now expanding in the United States, along with the immigrant police state that's now expanding beyond the borderlands. That's where the soul searching has to come in, because none of these things existed for the first 100 years of American history. They exist now. And I think that's a valuable clue as to what has happened to America and what we need to do to get this country back on the right track toward freedom, peace, prosperity, and harmony with the people of the world. That's Trump Watch for this week. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for your great support of FFF, and I look forward to talking to you all next week.